Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second match in the International Reparations Debate Competition 2025, the inaugural staging. My name is Jermaine Bart. I'll be the chair adjudicator for this match, and I'll now invite my wing adjudicators to introduce themselves, beginning with Calicia.
Good morning, everybody. I am Kalisa T. Vassal. I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator for match 2 in the international reparation debates. I'm looking forward to an exciting match, an exciting exchange of argumentation and ideas. All the best.
Good afternoon,
Yeah.
everyone. My name is Joshua Atkins. I serve as the Deputy Programs Manager in JADE. Sorry, am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. I serve as the Deputy Programs Manager in JADE. Likewise, I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator for the second match in this debate competition rather. I look forward to an exciting clash of ideas because I know the teams have prepared, vigorously for these rounds. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Joshua. And we have some partners and sponsors who have made this event possible. So I'm going to now ask Calicia to announce our partners and sponsors.
We're particularly pleased to highlight the University of the West Indies, CARICOM Reparation Commission, the Center for Reparation Research, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE Limited, the Repair Campaign, the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Public Advocacy, and the University of Hull.
All right, thank you very much, Calicia. And now, ladies and gentlemen, time to meet the teams. We have on-side proposition out of Jamaica, Your Castle High School. And of course, contesting the match against Your Castle is Arima North Secondary School out of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm now going to invite Your Castle, the proposition team, to introduce themselves in the order in which they'll be speaking.
So good day, everyone. My name is Hannah Chinto Singh, and I will be your Prime Minister for today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tarek Preddy, and I will be the Deputy Prime Minister for today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michaela Watson, and I will be the government member for today.
Thank you very much, York Castle. And of course, we now turn over to Arima North Secondary School out of Trinidad. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the order in which you'll be presenting.
Good afternoon to the esteemed panel. My name is Casey Marin, and I will be the opposition leader.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniela Hamilton. I will be the second speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I will be the third speaker.
All right, thank you very much, Arima. And of course, it is now time for you to be informed of the motion, the topic that these two teams will be contesting. So the motion goes as follows. This House believes that the descendants of enslavers should not be held responsible for reparations. So that is the motion that they're contesting. And the teams have all been briefed about the rules of the competition. They're all very much aware, and we are now ready to begin. Calicia will be serving as our timekeeper and adjudicator as well. So, without any further delay, I now call upon the first speaker from Your Castle High School, the Prime Minister, to open the debate. Hear, hear.
Honorable adjudicators, my worthy opponents, fellow teammates, and all present, good day. Justice should be pursued through institutional reform, neglecting to place burdens on individuals with no direct involvement in past atrocities. It is unreasonable and quite frankly unjust to expect the descendants of enslavers to bear direct responsibility. This House believes that the descendants of enslavers should not bear direct responsibility for reparation. As Prime Minister, I will contextualize the debate, preface the team split, introduce our model, and make our opening arguments. My Deputy Prime Minister will then examine the economic feasibility and the systematic implications of reparative justice. I will begin by defining some terms crucial to this debate. Reparation is defined as the action of making amends for a wrong done by providing payment or other assistance to those who have been wronged. And direct responsibility indicates that individual descendants of enslavers should be held majorly financially and otherwise accountable for compensating the descendants of enslaved people. As per the United Nations World Council, adequate, effective, and prompt reparation is intended to promote justice by redressing gross violations of international human rights law. Before beginning my substantive arguments, this government wishes to present the CARICOM 10-point plan that was coined and approved unanimously by all CARICOM states. The CARICOM Reparations Committee, CRC, asserts that European governments, and I quote, were owners and traders of enslaved Africans, instructed genocidal actions upon indigenous communities, created the legal, financial, and fiscal policies necessary for the enslavement of Africans, end quote. As such, the CRC law outlines the path to reconciliation through methods including, but not limited to, a full and formal apology from former colonial powers, debt cancellation, developmental programs to address disparities in health, education, and infrastructure, cultural and historical education to correct distortions in historical narratives, and ensuring that governments that benefited from slavery contribute to reparations. Unlike an individual-based approach, which would be impractical and divisive, the CARICOM plan ensures that reparations are collective, impactful, and legally viable, making it a fair and practical resolution to historical injustices. This plan is duly fit for purpose to ensure proper restorative action when proper measures are put in place to ensure enforcement. According to the United Nations World Council, reparations should be proportional to the gravity of the violations and harm suffered. I now move on to my substantives. Firstly, it is not rational, ethical, or legal for individuals to be held responsible for actions they did not commit, let alone have any part in. For example, Germany's Holocaust reparations were paid by the government, not by individual German citizens. As previously established in CARICOM's 10-point plan, reparative justice should focus on institutional responsibility. In a civilized society, if a parent commits a crime, their child will not be held criminally liable. This is no different. If we do not hold children legally accountable for their parents' crimes, there is no justifiable reason to hold the descendants of enslavers directly responsible for reparations. Instead, reparations should be a systematic responsibility, as outlined previously. Next, individuals cannot be held as directly responsible as it is difficult to determine who qualifies as a descendant of enslavers. Most Caribbean people have no idea about their full ancestry, especially since historical records are often unkept. People of West Indian origin are often both descendants of enslavers and enslaved people. According to the University of the West Indies, 15% of Jamaicans are Afro-Europeans and 3.2% are Caucasians. It is nearly entirely impossible to accurately identify all the descendants of enslavers. A system of direct financial reparation responsibility would be unfair and unworkable. In conclusion, this government bench affirms that the descendants of enslavers should not bear direct responsibility for reparations. This government rests momentarily.
Thank you very much to the first speaker from York Castle High School representing side proposition. I now call upon the first speaker from the opposition team, that's from Arima North Secondary School out of Trinidad and Tobago. The floor is now yours.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, worthy opponents, and my fellow debaters. Today we are faced with a moral reckoning that can no longer be deferred. The descendants of enslavers must bear direct responsibility for reparations, not as an act of vengeance, but as an act of justice. The motion proposes that they should not. Our side unequivocally rejects this claim. Before proceeding, let us establish some key definitions. Reparations, as defined by the Center for Reparation Research, means making amends for a wrong or injury committed and involves restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. Enslavers were individuals, families, institutions, and families that owned, profited from, or facilitated the transatlantic slave trade. According to the Legacies of British Slavery database, many British enslavers, in addition to plantation owners, were politicians, bankers, and investors who built generational wealth on the exploitation of enslaved people. Direct responsibility, as outlined by the United Nations Basic Principles, extends beyond perpetrators to those who have inherited the benefits of systematic human rights violations. It refers to the obligation to provide reparations due to the sustained benefits derived from slavery rather than personal guilt for historical actions. To argue that the descendants hold no responsibility assumes that history exists in isolation. Stolen labor and economic that centuries of stolen labor and economic exclusion have simply disappeared. They have not. The institutions, economies, and fortunes these descendants enjoy today were built on the back of.
Pardon?
Yes.
Could you clarify where you guys are saying that we are saying that there is no responsibility, or we're saying it's direct responsibility and not no responsibility?
Direct responsibility.
First speaker on opposition.
Pardon, Mr. Barrett?
You may go ahead.
Yes, our question is, we're asking, they're saying, we're asking them to clarify their stance, because we're saying it's no responsibility. However, we're saying it's direct responsibility. The mood states it is direct responsibility.
Yes, direct responsibility. I am trying to say that the descendants of enslavers still hold wealth amassed from slavery, and they have the right to return it. If something is stolen, the moral and legal obligation is to return it. Continuing, the proposition has argued that today's descendants did not commit the crime and they should not be held accountable. This is a fallacy. Responsibility is not about personal guilt. It is about rectifying structural and inherited injustices. Take the Legacies of British Slavery database by the University College London, which exposes how slave-owning families were compensated with over £20 million in 1833, equivalent to billions today. British taxpayers, including Caribbean descendants of the enslaved, paid off until 2015. Meanwhile, the actual victims received nothing. Are we to pretend that this generational transfer of stolen wealth has no direct impact today? As Caribbean historian Hilary Beckles states, the enslaved paid twice, first with their lives and labor, and then with their taxes to reimburse those who had enslaved them. To begin, reparations are not about penalizing individuals for their ancestors' sins, but about addressing ongoing benefits and privileges derived from those injustices. According to The Guardian, the Drax Hall plantation, owned by the Drax family for over 400 years, was built entirely on slave labor. Even today, this family enjoys immense wealth while the descendants of the enslaved received nothing. Similarly, the Codrington family amassed wealth from their plantations in Barbados, yet those lands remain in elite control while Black Barbadians continue to struggle for economic stability. According to the New York Times in the US, the Georgetown University case revealed how the Jesuits sold 272 enslaved Africans to keep the university financially solvent. Today, reparations are being pursued through scholarships to their descendants. Even the British royal family, King Charles III himself, has direct lineage benefiting from slavery with royal investments in the South Sea Company, a major player in the slave trade. If wealth can be inherited, then so can responsibility. Furthermore, reparations are not a radical demand. They are a well-established legal principle. Germany has paid over 90 billion euros in reparations to Holocaust survivors since 1952. The US provided 1.6 billion in reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission addressed apartheid injustices through reparative measures. Canada's Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement in 2006 compensated Indigenous communities for forced assimilation policies. Even Haiti was forced to pay reparations, 150 million francs in 1825, which amounts to over $21 billion today, to former enslavers in France for its own freedom. If enslaved people could be made to compensate their oppressors, why should their oppressors' descendants not be held accountable? As philosopher John Rawls stated, justice demands that inequalities be arranged to benefit those who were least advantaged by history. Moreover, this is not a legal or economic issue, it is an ethical one. Slavery was not simply a past event, It was a system of brutal forced labor, family separation, and cultural destruction that shaped today's racial and economic disparities. The Caribbean Reparations Commission's 10-point plan calls for more than just money. It seeks education, healthcare, and economic restoration for people of African descent. To suggest that these descendants of enslavers hold no responsibility is to whitewash history and absolve them of benefiting from a system that still oppresses Black communities worldwide. As Carla Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote, the idea of reparations is not the idea of restitution for past crimes, but also the full acceptance of our collective biography and its consequences. The time for excuses is over. The descendants of enslavers do not have the privilege of ignoring history when they continue to profit from it. If wealth can be inherited, so can responsibility. If governments and corporations can be held accountable, so can families who build their fortunes on slavery. If justice is truly a principle we uphold, then reparations are not a choice, they are an obligation. Justice delayed is justice denied, and today we demand justice. Honorable Chair, I urge this House to reject the motion. Thank you.
We thank the leader of the opposition, and now we enter an exciting part of our debate. This is the cross-examination section, the first of two. So what will happen now is that we'll invite the opposition, Arima North Secondary School, to pose 3 questions to the proposition, Your Castle High School. Those questions each are limited to 10 seconds, and each of the responses will be also limited, will be limited rather to 30 seconds. Arima, your time begins now.
If the descendants of enslavers should not be held accountable, then who should be?
We are saying the colonist governments that actually would have been the ones to formalize and perpetuate this institution of slavery. They're the ones who should be held responsible, as they would have amassed most of the wealth in comparison to individual persons who possibly wouldn't even have amassed half as much wealth or a portion of the wealth that their enslaved relatives would have accumulated during slavery.
But these institutions and corporations and banks that you guys are saying should pay for reparations instead of individuals, aren't these institutions, corporations, and banks not responsible and being operated by individuals? Are they not based off of the corporations and the banks and certain things that profit?
Thank you very much. Your 10 seconds has elapsed.
Okay, well, I wouldn't have heard the first part of the question, but from what I would have gathered, you were saying that banks and these institutions would have been owned, that would have amassed wealth. You're saying they would have been owned by individual persons. What we're saying is the direct responsibility that you guys are saying that individual persons should take on is in fact an injustice itself. We're saying that we believe that the colonist governments should bear direct responsibility. However, we're not saying individuals cannot bear responsibility. We're not saying they shouldn't bear any responsibility whatsoever. However, we're saying you cannot ask of them to bear direct responsibility when they wouldn't have been the ones to introduce and formalize these institutions and systems in the first place.
Why should individuals inherit wealth but not responsibility?
Why should individuals inherit wealth but not responsibility? Again, we are saying that individuals can and should hold responsibility. However, saying that they should bear direct responsibility for reparations is actually an injustice because they wouldn't have been the ones to introduce the system in such a way. And to further on my case, you were saying they would have inherited wealth. I'm pretty sure that the evidence goes to show in several novels that I will speak about in my speech to come, that not all these individuals who would have been related to the enslavers would have actually inherited wealth. Some of them would have inherited nothing because many of these enslavers would have probably lost their plantations due to debt, etc.
Thank you. I believe that is 30 seconds. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arima, for those questions, and thanks to Your Castle for those responses. Your Castle, your time begins now. You may ask 3 questions of Arima.
Are you suggesting that personal ancestry should dictate financial obligations in the present?
Yes, exactly that.
So would this
Reparation.
to other You can go ahead.
So it is facts that many banks and corporations still amass wealth built from slavery. And the moral obligation thing to do when something is stolen is to return it. They stole the wealth, they must return it.
Okay, thank you. So, would you? Sorry. Why should individuals be responsible when governments and institutions directly benefited from slavery and still exist today?
So reparations are not about targeting individuals, they are about repairing structural harm. Many institutions and families still inherit the money.
So, if institutions and corruption or corporations and governments perpetuated the injustice, why not hold them accountable instead, given that they would have amassed a large sum of the money or a
Yes,
large?
they should be held accountable because the CARICOM 10-point plan has a um, structured way to deal with reparations, such as land redistribution and education finances.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to your castle for those questions and to Arimo for those responses. The debate continues now. At this time, I welcome the second speaker. That's the Deputy Prime Minister from Your Castle Team Proposition.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'll be beginning in 3, 2, 1. Former US President James Madison once said, and I quote, "People will continue to seek justice on it until it is found or until liberty is lost in pursuit." Honorable adjudicators, my fellow government members, members of the opposition, and those of the viewing audience, good day to you all. Mr. Speaker, we are gathered here as a collective to discuss a topic of sensitive nature, yet of significant importance to status quo. Side government therefore raises our impartial belief that the descendants of enslavers should not bear direct responsibility for reparation. Mr. Speaker, allow me to open my case by directly appealing to those who have been oppressed. In my plea, may those who are seeking justice be just. The government believes that justice can be brought, Mr. Speaker, but sadly, not in the manner that the opposition poses. Before I further extend the government's case, let me first highlight an inconsistency in the opposition leader's argument. Now, it should have been going on about how wealth would have been amassed and inherited by several individuals, families, for instance. However, in her pleading or in her case that descendants hold wealth that would have been termed as stolen, the case is that colonialist governments would have amassed the most returns from the system of slavery and the many years that they would have subjected individuals to such inhumane and vile, gruesome acts. And what we're saying is that the governments should be the ones that are held directly responsible. However, we're not saying that individuals cannot be held responsible and should not be a responsibility. We're saying that in such a case, it should be voluntarily. And we say that with much regard to those individuals who would not have inherited anything whatsoever from slavery. Now, with that clarified, Mr. Speaker, I argue the government's belief as, firstly, the truth of the matter is that colonist governments profited significantly more than any individual person. Therefore, many of these descendants of enslavers would not have inherited much from slavery. Mr. Speaker, justice in this context would be ill-served if individualized, as the root cause was systemic. The government isn't negating the effects of slavery, nor are we refuting that several individuals benefited. However, reparative justice is most effectively addressed at a systemic level. And we say that with much regard for facts, and that I will prove to you in a few. Mr. Speaker, correcting the footprint left by slavery in the form of societal inequalities and other disparities, as opposed to individualization, is more important when it comes on to colonist governments addressing and bearing direct responsibility for their role in the system of slavery. Now, the rise of slavery and other technical aspects, such as the transatlantic slave trade, did not merely come about by the actions of an enslaver. However, it was more crucially promoted and implemented by the policies of colonial governments. Now, these were seen through the slave laws enacted, such as the Code Noir by the French or the Siete Partidas by the Spanish. Facilities such as militias to enact order and to punish these slaves brutally, and even investments in the system of slavery, which, as I would have mentioned earlier, they would have now seen returns. And these governments saw major returns on their investments, using the wealth generated to build infrastructure, expand their empires, and establish global dominance. The opposition's subsequent selection of descendants of enslavers for reparations and that they should bear direct responsibility, therefore overlooks the broader systemic nature of these injustices. And this suggests an individualized approach to accountability, which, Mr. Speaker, I'm pretty sure the House will not uphold. Now, the historical novel, Lest You Forget, Adjustments to Emancipation by Doris Hamilton Willie, outlined that the true nature of the situation where the British government compensated slave owners with £20 million, which is equivalent to billions in today's economy, after the abolition of slavery in 1833. That was actually something that, to my surprise, and I'm pretty sure to yours too, took storm, because these planters and these members of the plantocracy, they were, what should I say now, they were almost, they were given some incentive. However, the individuals that were enslaved received nothing. And this compensation was funded by the taxpayers. In the same novel, it was also highlighted how thousands of these same enslavers had lost their plantations post-emancipation due to deaths and inabilities in managing the plantation due to a workforce. Therefore, several descendants of enslavers simply would not have inherited much wealth. So basically, they'd have gotten the money, and some of them, many of them, in fact, would have lost it again, either in repaying debts or in trying to manage their plantations, which they would have subsequently lost. Mr. Speaker, asking of the descendants of enslavers to bear direct responsibility for an institution they would not have contributed to is unjust, where the colonist governments are the true perpetrators. Secondly, the government sees reparative justice best executed at a systemic level, where with the promotion and enabling of these heinous crimes by Spanish, English, and other governments, it is unjustifiable to relinquish direct responsibility onto descendants of enslavers. Many descendants of enslavers did not inherit wealth from slavery, and holding them direct responsibility for reparation is both impractical and unjust. Mr. Speaker, it is true that though some families accumulated generational wealth through slavery, such as the Drax family that she speaks of, Madam Opposition Leader, many others did not, and that is simply the truth. Mr. Speaker, reparations should address the systemic inequalities that persist today, rather than attempting to trace and penalize individual lineages. Mr. Speaker, a case study from the United States would have highlighted the complexity of this, and he would have spoke about a family, Latelia Dula, where they would have done reparative actions voluntarily, acknowledging their family history and advocating. And this reflects their responsibility, though not direct. And in the opposition's fairy tale land of fairness, Mr. Speaker, they are trying to deliver justice on the behalf of thousands by carrying out an injustice. As President Mason said in his speech, liberty will be lost if such a proposal by said opposition is allowed. There are other alternatives, other means of serving justice, but by penalizing the descendants of enslavers who at the time did not contribute directly to slavery and to the choices of and actions of their forefathers.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr.
Your
Speaker,
time has ended.
That they should not bear direct responsibility. With that, side proposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that speech. I now call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition from Arima to present their case. Hear, hear.
Sorry, are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Throughout this debate, the proposition has built its argument on denial, evasion, and selective morality. They seek to absolve the descendants of enslavers from responsibility by hiding behind weak justifications. But historical facts, legal precedent, and moral reasoning expose these justifications as hollow. It is often claimed that today's descendants of enslavers should not be held accountable because they didn't personally enslave anyone. But it is imperative to recognize that reparations aren't about individual guilt. They're about addressing the ongoing benefits of historical injustice. In Trinidad and Tobago, the racial wealth gap is a direct legacy of slavery. Many Afro-Trinidadians were left with nothing post-emancipation, while slave-owning families inherited land and businesses, perpetuating economic inequality. The descendants of the enslaved still face income disparities, limited access to credit and education, as well as employment discrimination, all of which is a direct consequence of colonial exploitation. The idea that descendants should not bear responsibility ignores the fact that they continue to reap benefits from an unjust system. As Dr. Hilary Beckles, chair of CARICOM Reparations Commission, once stated, those who benefit from a crime must share in the responsibility of rectifying it. Not to mention, a common misconception is that reparations would bankrupt economies. But this is false. Reparations can be structured to stimulate economic growth. For instance, consider the CARICOM 10-point plan, which calls for debt cancellation as a form of reparations. Jamaica spent over 50% of its annual budget repaying debt inherited from colonial rule. As history has shown, Trinidad and Tobago, though resource-rich, still faces economic inequalities rooted in slavery. Cancelling debt would free up resources for education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Furthermore, reparations can also include land redistribution. Former enslavers were compensated for their loss of property when slavery was abolished, but freed Africans received absolutely nothing. According to Beckles' 2016, in Guyana, 90% of land is still owned by European-descended elites, despite Afro-Guyanese having built the country. Conclusively, land reform would create generational wealth and economic independence. Additionally, institutions that profited from slavery should pay their share. In the UK, banks like Lloyds of London and Barclays financed the slave trade. Even in Trinidad and Tobago, an Angostura bitters, a world-famous product, was built on the profits of the enslaved. A tax on these institutions could help fund reparations. The belief that descendants of enslavers should not bear direct responsibility for reparations because it would be impossible to track the descendants of the enslavers is flawed, because while it may seem that reparations are unrealistic, governments, universities, and even individuals have already begun taking action. For instance, in 2019, University of Glasgow committed 20 million euros in reparations for its ties to Caribbean slavery. In 2022, Harvard University pledged 100 million for reparations after research revealed it profited from slavery. And also in 2022, Dutch government formally apologized and committed 200 million for reparation programs. Even wealthy families individually have begun taking responsibility, such as the Trevlin and Gladstone families have apologized and donated 100,000 euros each to reparation efforts in Grenada and Guyana. In other words, reparations aren't a fantasy. They're happening. If these institutions and individuals recognize their responsibility, why shouldn't others? Some may even contend that reparations would be too difficult to implement. On the contrary, this is a weak excuse. We live in an age where global financial transactions are seamless. If Germany could pay reparations to Jewish descendants, and the US could compensate Japanese Americans interned during World War II, then Western powers and their wealthy beneficiaries can certainly compensate the Caribbean for centuries of plunder and suffering. Reparations are not charity. They are a long overdue correction of historical injustice. It is evident that the descendants of enslaved Africans continue to suffer from economic, social, and psychological wounds inflicted upon their ancestors. Meanwhile, the descendants of enslavers still hold wealth and power gained through exploitation. Ultimately, to say it wasn't me is to ignore the reality that reparations are not about guilt, they are about responsibility. They are not about punishing individuals, they are about restoring justice.
Point of information.
Proceed.
Yeah, you just made a statement to say it's not me, and I quote, to say it's not me. However, had the proposition in any time in our case to say that these people did not bear any footing in the overall reparation or reparative act or of reparative justice and giving back to these people who would have been oppressed.
I'm sorry. Could you rephrase that?
Okay, essentially what I'm asking is, did we say that these people aren't to at their own will give back to the people who would have been oppressed?
Yes, you did. But also, even individual families have already voluntarily given their each to, even though individual families have voluntarily given their profits to descendants of the enslaved, it shouldn't be voluntary or involuntary. Once you hold the financial wealth and you are able, you should be able to pay reparations. Can I proceed?
Yes, you may. You have a few seconds remaining.
The question is not whether reparations should be paid, but whether we will continue to allow injustice to persist. The answer is clear. Justice must be served and reparations must happen. As Tanashi quotes once said, reparations are not about the past, they're about the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. We enter now our second phase of cross-examination. As we did in the first phase, the opposition team gets a chance to ask 3 questions of the proposition team, and then we will flip to allow the proposition team their opportunity to ask 3 questions of the opposition team. Please be reminded that a question is limited to 10 seconds and a response limited to 30 seconds. I invite both teams to unmute their microphones so that we can have a smooth flow of this segment. Arima, you may ask your first question.
Shouldn't families that profited the most at least acknowledge their role?
It was never stated by side proposition that like families that have gained wealth should not acknowledge their roles and give back. It was never stated.
In fact, we also mentioned where one family from a case study done in the United States would have given back voluntarily, acknowledging their family's role in the past events of slavery. And we are saying that you opposition is suggesting that they bear direct responsibility for it. However, they would not have been the ones to institutionalize this. The governments, the colonist governments would have, and they should bear direct responsibility. So it is at their will, and I stand to correct you because you said we said they did not, they were not supposed to, at their own will, give back.
Next question.
Arima, you may ask your second question.
If institutions are responsible or supposed to be held responsible, why haven't they paid yet?
Given the CARICOM 10-point plan, we have a plan. The problem is instituting this plan and enforcing this plan. We have greater powers that are among us, the UK, the US. We are not able, without proper, infrastructure, without proper pushing, for them to institute this point plan. So yes, we suggest something, but it's all up to the governments and the United Nations World Council to hold these people accountable, to hold these governments accountable, to hold these banks and other big institutions accountable.
Doesn't justice demand that those who benefit from a crime compensate those harmed, either it be voluntary or involuntary?
Could you repeat? Could you repeat, please?
Doesn't justice demand that those who benefit from a crime compensate those harmed, either it be voluntary or involuntary, as you guys stated?
I'll have the opposition know that this motion states that the descendants should not bear direct responsibility. Not that they should bear no responsibility at all. We are speaking about how direct, how much of this responsibility should they be?
And given the dynamic nature of this situation and the context in which we're speaking, it'd be a fantasy, a fairy tale land of fairness that you guys are suggesting to us, that we have them hand over all the wealth that they would have, some of them at least would have amassed or inherited from former enslavers. Because the bigger issue is the
Thank
government
you,
would have allowed.
response time elapsed.
Thank you very much, Arima, for your questions and your castle for your responses. I now invite your castle to ask questions of team opposition, Arima.
So this ties into what our government member will say later, but how do you prevent resentment and social division if people are forced to pay reparations simply because of their ancestry?
Reparations are about healing and restoring historical injustices. It is about bringing economies together. It have a serious wealth gap in the Caribbean based off the ancestors and the descendants of enslaved and enslavers. It shouldn't be a separation, it should be community.
Wouldn't this risk simply create new injustices rather than solving the already existing ones?
What creates social injustices is reparations being ignored. For example, when Germany paid the Holocaust survivors, it did not create resentment. It acknowledges their mistake and reparations were made.
Okay, and final question, linking back to your previous question to us, you would have said that justice and the crime, so they would have benefited from a crime. However, how do you justify that statement when these things were in fact laws? And as I mentioned in my speech, how they were enacted by laws such as the Ceta Partidas and Code Noir. These things were institutionalized and legal. So how do you justify that? Although it might be wrong, how do you justify that and the legality of it?
Your question time has elapsed.
Can I answer? Legality does not equate to morality. Just because something was legal doesn't make it right. History is full of past injustices that was eventually corrected. Reparations is one of the things that have not been corrected, and it lasted the longest of 400 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to both teams for that exciting and enthralling segment of cross-examination. We're now going to pause the debate for 1 minute. At the end of the 1 minute pause, we'll resume rather with the response from the third speaker from Team Arima North Secondary School, and then the debate will conclude thereafter with the third speaker's presentation from York Castle High School. Your 1 minute begins now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls rather, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are back and ready to conclude our debate. At this time, I invite the third speaker from the opposition team, that's Team Arima North Secondary School out of Trinidad and Tobago, to provide that summary speech in 5 minutes, and then we will conclude the debate overall with that presentation from Your Castle's third speaker.
Today,
Excuse me. Sorry, before you guys begin. I
Yes.
was told that there would be 4 speeches. So for Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, government member, and then a reply. Has that changed?
No. So it was always just 3 speeches, as we're having it here. So it would be Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and then what we call the whip speaker from either team.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is that up to you? Was you going first?
it's me. Today's debate was not just about the past, it was about accountability in the present. The opposition has attempted to distance today's descendants of enslavers from reparations, but we have demonstrated that history is not an isolated event. It is a living force that continues to shape our economies, social structures, and opportunities. Let us recap the indisputable truths established in this debate. Inherited wealth, inherited responsibility. The descendants of enslavers still benefit from generational wealth, land, and power, while the descendants of enslaved continue to face economic disparities and social exclusion. We prove this with examples like the Drax family, the Codrington family, the British royal family, and institutions like Georgetown University, all of whom prospered from slavery and still benefit today. If wealth can be inherited, then so can responsibility. Furthermore, reparations are illegal and moral precedent. We dismantle the false claim that reparations are impractical by showing that reparations have already been paid to Holocaust survivors, Japanese Americans, indigenous communities in Canada, and victims of apartheid in South Africa. The precedent is clear. When injustice has lasting consequences, those who benefit must contribute to repairing the harm. Additionally, addressing the opposition's claims. The opposition tried to hide behind denial and evasion, arguing that descendants should not be responsible for their ancestors' actions. But this debate was never about personal guilt. It is about rectifying the benefits that were passed down through generations. We expose how institutions and families that profited from slavery still hold economic power, while Afro-Caribbean communities remain systemically disadvantaged. Lastly, justice cannot be selective. We shatter the notion that reparations would be divisive or economically unfeasible. In reality, CARICOM's 10-point plan, debt cancellation, land redistribution, and direct institutional contributions provide a roadmap for real reparatory justice. Reparations are not a handout, they are a long overdue correction to historical theft and economic exploitation. Now, let us ask ourselves, if we condemn slavery as a crime against humanity, why should those who still benefit from it escape accountability? If reparations have been paid to other communities, why should the descendants of enslaved Africans be the only exception? If justice is truly a principle we uphold, then reparations are not a choice, they are an obligation. Honorable Chair, today, history demands an answer. This is not about punishing individuals, it is about repairing systemic harm. The fact that we are still debating this issue in 2025 is proof of how long justice has been denied. But the world is changing. Reparations are already happening. Universities, governments, and even wealthy families have begun to take responsibility. Justice is not a question of if, but when. We, on this side of the House, refuse to allow history wounds to fester any longer. The descendants of enslavers must bear direct responsibility for reparations because their privilege exists at the expense of stolen lives and stolen labor. Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, this is not just a question of fairness, it is a question of fundamental justice. And justice cannot wait. For these reasons, we firmly reject the motion. Thank you.
think I think Jermaine's Wi-Fi fell off. Um, I'm sorry. Could the administrator from the CRR advise whether or not we should give him a minute to try and rejoin, or just proceed with the finals? Okay. So that being said, we thank the third speaker from the opposition for their submission, and we're going to invite the third speaker from Your Castle High to close off the debate. Thank you.
And I will start in 3, 2, 1. Adjudicators, members of the opposition, teammates, and viewers, good day once more. This debate begs the question, who should bear the responsibility for reparations? Through our policy and our arguments, we have proven that reparative justice is best served when institutions take direct responsibility for rectifying historical justices. The opposition, on the other hand, has pushed for a system that is empirical, decisive, and legally unsound. But we have given a fairer, more enforceable model of reparations that has been agreed upon unanimously by all CARICOM states, and therefore the panel will have no doubt in siding with this government. Our side successfully demonstrated that reparations must be structured, fair, and practical, rather than an arbitrary burden based on ancestry. Throughout the debate, it was evident that side opposition misunderstood the motion. Note that the mood states that the descendants of enslavers should not bear direct responsibility for reparation, not that they should be free from all responsibility. I'd like to correct a misconception of the opposition before I enter the clashes. Debates do not automatically join accounts, co-signed loans, and community property states. In Clash 1, we do not hold people accountable for crimes they did not commit. Just like in 1988 US, the Civil Liberties Act was passed, formally apologizing for the internment and recognizing it as a violation of civil rights when the government forcibly relocated over 120,000 Japanese Americans to internment camps during World War II, where the US government paid, not individual persons. Governments, corporations, and financial institutions that profited from slavery still exist and can be held accountable. Clash 2. The CARICOM 10-point plan, coined by the CRC, ensured that reparations are structured, achievable, and address long-term harm through debate cancellation, development programs, and institutional reform. The opposition approach seeks individual financial responsibility, which could create resentment and backlash. Our approach invests in education, healthcare, and economic justice, directly improving the lives of affected communities. Note that side opposition has not contributed a deepening division, a counter policy for the CARICOM 10-point plan, side opposition, non-approach risk, deepening divisions by forcing individuals to pay based on ancestry rather than tackling systemic inequality. Clash 3. The opposition would have argued that it is possible to identify these individuals and hold them accountable. Many people today descend from both enslaved and enslaved individuals. Many historical documents on slave ownership have been destroyed or lost over time. Their mother cannot fairly assign blame. Many people in former colonial powers have no family ties to slavery. Would they also be forced to pay? This debate was about fairness, justice, and practicality. We showed that reparation should not be an arbitrary financial punishment on individuals, but rather a responsibility majorly handled through governments and institutions. The opposition failed to improve that their model could be enforced fairly and their approach risked causing new injustices rather than correcting past ones. The government now rests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, debater. That's from Your Castle High School. Thank you for your speech, and thanks to Arimo North Secondary School as well for their presentation overall. And this time we will pause to deliberate, and when we return with the results and the explanation for the results.
We are your Behind.
As direct descendants of African enslaved people, as well as other groups affected by European colonization,
it is imperative that issues regarding the post-colonist Caribbean and in the diaspora is sufficiently addressed. As the youth of the Caribbean and citizens of Jamaica, it's important that we are so much more than meticulous researchers and brilliant minds. This is personal.
Thank you so much for your consideration, and we are so excited to be afforded this opportunity.
A pleasant good morning to the esteemed panel.
We represent Arima North Secondary.
Reparations matter because they're more than payments. They are about restoring dignity, recognizing history, and rewriting futures.
We're not just debaters, we're visionaries, ready to lead conversations that challenge the everyday norm.
I'm here to ignite debate with passion, knowledge, and the power to persuade.
Choose us and we'll prove that this platform can be a catalyst for justice, change, and a better tomorrow.
The Center for Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this International Reparation Debate Competition. This International Reparation Debate Competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparation so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional / international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end. It left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the cause for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Matherin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lowered their enslavers' expectations and reduced suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you will be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get our strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just culture, it was spiritual, because you took me away from everything. Who then must I look up to? Who then must I emulate? Who then must I kill myself in order to elevate you?
What is common about the wealth? A flag raises high, but the strings still pull from London. We sing our anthems in borrowed tongues, march to the beat of siphons' drums, celebrating a freedom that still pays tribute. Independent? What is that when the governor's shadow still lingers? They tell us, we free. Tell that to the bones at Rapparee. The 196 who fought and won only to drown in chains. Our Negmawan. Do the people of North Devon not hear the howls raging for their home? The tide spits their cries, their names foam in fury, salted by a sea that will not forget. They call us independent, yet a crown still sits above 14 nations, still bent at the knee, still ruled by a throne built from our gold. They took our labor, snatched our names, they welcomed our craft, then cast us adrift. Windrush mothers, fathers, exiled from the empire they built. What is common about the wealth? Our persistent potency that perseveres through acute artistry. We carve language into legacy, turn sorrow into song, drum resistance as rhythm, sink steel into symphony. We are the architects of new worlds, the poets, the painters, the prophets, who make home in remnants still, who forge futures from fractured pasts. They took the wealth, but we are the riches.
And remember that chattel slavery of the African people was also genocide. This is not highlighted sufficiently. If you take my home island of Barbados in the Caribbean, the British brought 600,000 people into Barbados. 600,000 Africans were brought into Barbados. The black population of Barbados today is 280,000. How do you reduce 600,000 to 290,000 after 200 years? They brought 3 million into Jamaica. At the end of the slavery malarkey, there were just about 600,000. The survival rate of African people in the Caribbean was about 17%. It was horrendous.
The Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community.
But I will say to you, therefore, that the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slavery is an issue that we will take up with you, and that the appropriate apology and compensation is paid, and that the international community accepts that this should never happen again.
And yes, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, slavery is a crime against humanity.
The concept of reparations would take the question of development repair, and it would be multi-generational. What needs to happen is face-to-face discussions, which we deem as absolutely important, because if you can't see me or hear me, it is not appropriate to be able to make a judgment as to who or what I am and what I should receive.
Progress also means reparatory justice to heal historical wounds and climate justice to secure our future. We must be bold, demand what is old, and build a Caribbean that thrives.
Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this international reparation debate competition. This international reparation debate competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparations so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, okay, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional stroke international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end. It left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us. Join the calls for justice and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Feel the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight, we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, Master said there's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations, we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight, we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just culture, it was spiritual, because you took me away from it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the second match in the International Reparations Debate Competition for 2025. And I'm here with the results and the analysis. All right, so we had an exciting debate just now, looking at the question as to whether or not individuals who are the descendants of enslavers, should they or should they not be held directly responsible for slavery and ultimately for reparations. Yes, we had two teams contesting this motion. That's York Castle High School out of Jamaica and Arima North Secondary School out of Trinidad and Tobago, right? Of course, the engagement was intense, and of course, one of the things that was significant in our deliberation is the question about what exactly is the basis for establishing direct responsibility. Yes, is direct responsibility a reflection of you taking ownership of the atrocities of slavery? You being sorry, not just sorry, but as sorry as if it were that you had committed it. The quantum of responsibility being direct suggests to us that it's as though you have done it yourself, and therefore the repayment or the reparations that are to be exacted upon you are as though you had committed it yourself. So that we felt was material consideration in the match, right? We felt that the argumentation from York Castle was hinged largely on the question about a government being one, more effective at instituting or executing reparations, and two, that the government would have been instrumental in establishing systems that allow the perpetration of the crime of slavery, and of course that they also benefited materially from slavery, and therefore on those grounds they ought to be the ones held directly responsible for slavery. On the other hand, Arima tells us that persons who exist within companies currently are still benefiting from slavery. They are still reaping the proceeds of a crime, and as such, that places them as direct agents of bearing responsibility for that particular atrocity. Yes. We felt that in as much as Arima's examples were largely of companies and organizations that have in contemporary times paid back for or compensated for the ills of slavery, have taken responsibility and are holding themselves accountable for slavery, we felt that York Castle missed an opportunity to directly engage with or challenge that kind of characterization, to suggest to us, for example, that these companies are not representative of the stakeholders under consideration as per the motion, that individuals acting within their own agency would be the ones being contemplated to own or take direct responsibility for reparations. We felt that that was a missed opportunity significantly for York Castle. We felt as well, though, that the question of practicality, whether or not it is practical for individuals or companies, disparate as they are, to undertake or execute reparations, whether or not that is possible. York Castle tells us that no, it's not going to be likely. It's going to be possibly a very cumbersome and tedious and inefficient process. Whereas if we hold governments responsible, then there can be better targeting and better engagement of government, so that the proceeds of reparations can flow more seamlessly to those who were impacted by slavery. We felt that the motion suggests that there is feasibility, in as much as in debate we talk about something called fiat, that the team contemplating executing the action as per the motion, which in this case it would be Arima. Arima, we felt, has fiat, such that they don't have to mechanize or tell us exactly how it is that the system or the Caribbean governments, for example, would execute reparations upon individual descendants of enslavers, but rather that we should just assume that it can be done, and then the debate should have proceeded therefrom. Okay. We also felt that York Castle, needed to have done a little bit more work to prove to us that, when York Castle concedes that they're okay, perfectly okay with individuals operating as companies, or companies rather, that when these companies give reparations or commit themselves as being directly responsible for slavery, and therefore hold themselves accountable to contribute to reparations, we felt that those kinds of concessions did not do a tremendous amount of good, in as much as their explanation as to why it is that they are not directly responsible, but rather should still engage in reparations. We felt that that created a bit of a slight dissonance in their case. We felt that a more harmonious case would have been something to the effect that they are not directly responsible, and possibly should funnel their profits and their funds towards reparations through their government, as taxpayers do in the status quo. So in that final analysis, ladies and gentlemen, we felt that a keenly contested match results in the scores being that the losing team ends with 268 points, as compared to the winning team's 272 points. The winner of the second match in the International Reparations Debate Competition for 2025 is Arima North Secondary School. Congratulations, Arima. We also wish to extend commendations to York Castle High School from Jamaica on doing a very good job. Of course, proving that they are keenly interested in the issues and did some thorough research, but unfortunate for them, it was just not as good as the research and the analysis provided by Arima. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join us in at the top of the hour, because we are going to be proceeding to the next match for the day, and we would definitely welcome you joining us and sharing in the conversation that will ensue from that debate. Thank you very much. The debater in this match comes to us from Arima, and that speaker is the first speaker there from the opposition team.
Congrats, guys.
Congrats. Yeah. Thank you guys for participating, and thank you for coming against us. You guys did great, and you guys had strong points as well as confidence, and yeah. Okay, thank you.